What if the person who swore they didn't need anyone needed you more than words could ever say? Sit with that, because somewhere in this world right now, there is a soul who has spent their entire life mastering the art of leaving before they could be left, running before the storm could reach them, smiling just enough to keep people close but never close enough to matter. And the world looked at them and said, they're cold, they're distant, they don't feel. But I want to tell you something that will change the way you see love forever. They feel everything. That's the truth nobody talks about. The avoidant doesn't feel less. They feel so much that the heart learned to build armor just to survive it. Every wall they constructed wasn't made of stone. It was made of pain, old pain, pain that said, the last time you opened this door, someone walked through it and destroyed you. And so they shut it, locked it, threw away the key and told themselves they were better off alone. And for a long time they believed it. But here's what I know about the human spirit: it cannot be permanently imprisoned by its own fear. Life has a way of sending the right person at exactly the moment your armor starts to crack, not to tear you open, not to conquer you, but to simply sit beside you and say, I'm not going anywhere. And something inside the avoidant, something ancient, something tired, something that has been waiting without knowing it was waiting, begins to stir. You see, most people think falling in love is easy. They think love just happens like rain falls. But for the avoidant, falling in love is an act of courage so profound it rivals the bravest thing any human being has ever done. Because they are not just choosing a person. They are choosing to undo every defense mechanism they spent decades perfecting. They are choosing to unlearn the lie that love always ends in loss. They are choosing to rewrite the story that was written for them before they were old enough to know they deserved a different ending. That is not weakness. That is war. And they are choosing to lay down their weapons. Now understand this: when an avoidant loves you, they don't love you casually. They don't love you the way someone loves a sunset, beautiful for a moment and then forgotten. When an avoidant finally lets you in, they love you the way a man lost in the desert loves water. Completely, desperately, sacredly. Because they know what it cost them to get there. They know the internal battlefield they had to cross just to say your name without wanting to disappear. The universe, God, life, whatever you call the force that holds all things together, did not design the human heart for isolation. Every single one of us, no matter how many times we've been broken, no matter how many times we swore never again, we were built for connection. It is encoded in our very biology. It is written into the architecture of our souls. The avoidant didn't P that design, they just fought it longer. And when they stop fighting, when they finally surrender to love, something miraculous happens. The very places in them that were wounded become the very places where wisdom lives. Their past stops being a prison and starts becoming a purpose. Every season of loneliness they endured quietly becomes a testimony to the depth of their capacity to now love fiercely and faithfully and fully. Because here's the divine principle I want you to carry with you today: our greatest breakthroughs live on the other side of our deepest resistance. The avoidant resisted love more than almost anyone, which means when they break through, what waits on the other side is a love more intentional, more conscious, more transformative than most people ever experience in a lifetime. They don't love you because it's easy. They love you in spite of everything that told them not to. And there is no higher form of love than that. So if you are an avoider, NT standing at the edge of your own heart right now, terrified to step forward, I want to speak directly to you. You are not broken. You are not too damaged. You are not too far gone. The very depth of your fear is the evidence of the depth of your capacity. You don't fear love because you are incapable of it. You fear it because somewhere deep down, you know how completely you will give yourself to it once you do. And that person in front of you, that rare, patient, persistent soul who keeps showing up, they are not the enemy. They are the answer to the prayer you forgot you prayed. Let them in. Not all at once, not recklessly, but deliberately. One honest word at a time, one vulnerable moment at a time, one decision after another to stay when every old instinct screams at you to go, because the life you are capable of living, the love you are capable of experiencing is not behind the wall. It never was. It's on the other side of the door you've been afraid to open, and that. Today is the day you turn the handle. There is a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when a person who has spent their entire life hiding behind emotional distance suddenly realizes that the wall, there is a moment quiet, almost imperceptible, when a person who has spent their entire life hiding behind emotional distance suddenly realizes that the wall they built to protect themselves has become the very thing imprisoning them. This is the turning point for the avoidant. This is where everything changes. Not with a dramatic explosion, not with a grand declaration, but with a single trembling crack in the armor they have worn so long they forgot it wasn't skin. For years, sometimes decades, the avoidant operates from a deeply embedded belief system that says closeness is dangerous, that intimacy is a trap, that the moment you allow someone to truly see you, truly know you, truly matter to you, you have handed them a weapon pointed directly at your heart. And so they became architects of distance, masterful, almost artistic in their ability to be present without being there. They laugh at the right moments, say the right things, show up just enough, but always with one foot pointed toward the exit, always with an escape route quietly mapped out in the back of their mind. But here is what the world misunderstands about that wall. It was never built out of coldness. It was never built out of indifference or superiority or a lack of feeling. That wall was built out of survival. It was constructed brick by brick from every moment someone they loved made them feel like too much or not enough or both at the same time. Every childhood moment where emotional needs were met with absence. Every relationship where vulnerability was punished instead of honored. Every time they reached out and found nothing there, the wall went up because at some point staying open felt like standing in the rain with no shelter and calling it freedom. So they built the wall, and it worked. It kept the pain out. But here is the tragedy that no one tells you about walls. They are not selective. They do not only block pain, they block everything. They block joy. They block belonging. They block the kind of deep, soul-level connection that makes a human life feel like it actually means something. The avoidant gains safety but loses aliveness. They gain control but lose color. Life becomes manageable, predictable, and quietly, devastatingly empty. And then love arrives. Not the kind of love they could easily dismiss or keep at arm's length, but the real kind. The inconvenient kind. The kind that looks at the wall and doesn't flinch. The kind that doesn't demand they tear it down all at once, but simply stands on the other side with a patience that feels almost supernatural. And something begins to happen inside the avoidant that they have no framework for, no defense against. They begin to want to be known, not despite the risk, because of it. For the first time, the idea of being truly seen by another human being stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like a possibility worth dying for. This is the moment the wall becomes a window. They don't demolish it. They don't pretend it was never there. They don't perform some Hollywood transformation overnight. What happens is far more profound than that. That same structure they spent years hiding behind begins to shift in its very purpose. The wall that once said, "No one gets in slowly," courageously begins to say, "Let me show you what's inside." The barriers become transparent. The armor becomes a story they are finally willing to tell. The distance they maintain so expertly becomes the very contrast that helps them appreciate, with breathtaking clarity, what closeness actually feels like. And when an avoidant lets you see through that window, when they take everything they built to keep the world out and turn it into something they offer you with open, shaking hands, you are not running. OT, receiving ordinary love. You are receiving transformed love. Love that has been tested by years of resistance. Love that has been refined by the fire of fear. Love that chose you not because it was easy, but because you were finally worth the dismantling of everything they thought kept them safe. That is not just love. That is a resurrection. There is a lie that gets whispered into the hearts of avoidants so early, so consistently, so quietly, that they eventually stop recognizing it as a lie at all. There is a lie that gets whispered into the hearts of avoidants so early, so consistently, so quietly, that they eventually stop recognizing it as a lie at all. The lie sounds like this: you are better alone. Needing someone is weakness. Attachment is the beginning of suffering. And so they build their entire identity around that belief. They become self-sufficient to a degree that looks admirable from the outside but feels hollow on the inside. They train themselves to need nothing. Want nothing, depend on nothing, because in their experience, everything you depend on eventually disappears. And the fear that drives all of this is not small. It is not a minor inconvenience they push through on a difficult morning. It is a deep, ancient, bone-level terror that says, if I let someone matter to me, I will be destroyed when they leave, and they will leave. Everyone always does. This fear is not irrational to them. It is the most rational conclusion in the world based on the evidence their life has provided. It is a perfectly logical response to an emotional history written in abandonment, inconsistency, and unmet needs. The avoidant does not fear love because they are broken. They fear it because they are paying attention to every lesson their past ever taught them. But here is where the story takes its most extraordinary turn. When the right person arrives, and I mean the right person, not perfect, but right, something happens inside the avoidant that no amount of self-protection could have prepared them for. The fear does not disappear. Let me be absolutely clear about that, because this is where most people misunderstand love's power. The fear stays. It shows up every single morning. It whispers in the quiet moments. It floods back in during arguments. It tightens in the chest every time vulnerability is required. The avoidant in love does not wake up one day cured of their terror. What changes is not the presence of fear. What changes is what they find on the other side of it. They discover someone worth being terrified for, and that changes everything, because for the first time in their lives, the equation shifts. It is no longer, is staying safe worth being alone? It becomes, is being alone worth losing this? And when they look at the person standing in front of them, this person who has somehow inexplicably gotten past every defense, every deflection, every carefully constructed emotional barricade, the answer that rises up, P from the deepest part of them, is a resounding, terrifying, liberating no. This is one of the most powerful principles in human psychology and in the spiritual architecture of love itself. Desire, when it is genuine and deep enough, will always eventually outrun fear, not because fear becomes smaller, but because desire becomes larger. The avoidant doesn't conquer their fear through willpower or therapy alone. They conquer it by finding something they want more than they want to be safe, and wanting to keep this person, wanting to build this life, wanting to feel this connection every day. That want grows so enormous that fear simply cannot keep pace with it anymore. Think about what that means. Think about the sheer magnitude of love that must exist inside a person for it to override years, sometimes an entire lifetime of carefully constructed emotional withdrawal. This is not casual affection. This is not convenience or comfort or habit. When an avoidance desire for connecting finally overtakes their instinct for self-protection, what you are witnessing is one of the most volcanic, most consuming, most committed forms of love the human heart is capable of producing. They chose you while shaking. They stayed while every nerve in their body screamed retreat. They reached for your hand while their mind was already calculating exit strategies, and they reached anyway. That is not someone half in. That is someone who walked through their own personal fire and came out the other side still holding on to you. The world will never fully understand the courage that lives inside that kind of love, but you should know it. You should honor it. Because when an avoidance desire finally outpaces their fear, what they are handing you is not just their heart. They are handing you their greatest victory. Most people fall in love the way they fall asleep gradually, then all at once, without fully understanding how it happened or what it cost them. Most people fall in love the way they fall asleep gradually, then all at once, without fully understanding how it happened or what it cost them. Love arrives and they welcome it naturally, almost instinctively, the way a flower turns towards sunlight without being taught to. There is beauty in that. There is grace in that. But there is a different kind of love that exists in this world, a rarer kind, a costlier kind, a kind that most people will never fully comprehend because they have never had to fight their entire nervous system just to say, I choose you. This is the love of the avoidant. And what makes it unlike anything else in the entire spectrum of human emotion is this: it was not stumbled into. It was not inherited from a naturally open heart or an emotionally generous childhood. It was not the path of least resistance or the comfortable choice or the thing that simply made sense. The avoidance love was chosen deliberately, consciously, against every survival instinct, against every internal alarm, against every scar tissue memory that screamed danger the moment someone got too close. Understand what that means at the deepest level. Every human being carries within them what psychology calls attachment patterns, the invisible blueprint laid down in early childhood that determines how we relate to love, closeness, and emotional dependence for the rest of our lives. For the securely attached, love flows relatively freely. The channel is open. The current moves naturally. But for the avoidant, that channel was dammed up early, blocked by experiences that taught them that emotional openness leads to pain, that needing someone leads to disappointment, that the safest version of love is the one you keep at arm's length, where it cannot reach your most tender places. So when an avoidant falls in love genuinely, completely, irrevocably, they are not just making a romantic choice. They are making a neurological revolution. They are rewiring patterns that were burned inside, their brain before they had the language to describe them. They are dismantling a belief system that kept them emotionally alive through some of the most formative and painful seasons of their existence. Every step toward real intimacy is a conscious act of will against an unconscious pull toward withdrawal. Every moment of vulnerability is a decision made in direct opposition to everything their emotional history conditioned them to do. That is not falling in love. That is climbing into love, hand over hand, against gravity, against wind,
against every voice inside that says turn back.
And here is the divine wisdom buried inside that truth, the things we choose consciously, deliberately, at great personal cost, are the things we value most completely. A person who walks into a gift shop and picks up something beautiful spends money and leaves. But a person who climbs a mountain, endures the cold, fights exhaustion, and reaches the summit to find something beautiful up there, a person carries it home as though it were sacred, because to them it is sacred. The cost transformed the value. The avoidance love works exactly this way. Because they did not arrive at love easily, they do not take it lightly. Because they paid for their openness with the currency of enormous personal courage, they guard what they have found with a ferocity and a faithfulness that is almost breathtaking to witness. They are not in this relationship because it is convenient. They are not staying because leaving feels complicated. They are present. They are committed. They are decided in a way that someone who loves easily and often simply cannot replicate, because every single day they remain is another conscious choice made against the part of them that still whispers you could disappear and be safe again, and they stay anyway. They stay in the discomfort. They stay in the vulnerability. They stay in the beautiful, terrifying, wide-open exposure of being truly known by another. Our human being, not because it stopped being hard, but because you became worth every hard moment. So never mistake the avoidance love for ordinary affection dressed in complicated packaging. What they are offering you is the rarest artifact in the entire human experience. A love that was earned from the inside out. A love that was built against resistance. A love that looked at every reason to retreat and advanced anyway. That is not just devotion. That is a declaration. And declarations like that do not expire. There is a child living inside every avoidant adult. There is a child living inside every avoidant adult. Not a metaphor. Not a poetic device. A real, breathing, trembling, desperately hoping child who learned something devastating about love before they were old enough to protect themselves from the lesson. This child did not choose to become avoidant. This child did not sit down one afternoon and decide that closeness was the enemy and distance was the solution. This child simply experienced something or a series of somethings that rewired the most fundamental question every human being carries from birth. The question is this: am I safe to love and be loved? And for the avoidant, the answer that came back again and again from the earliest and most formative relationships of their life was a devastating, confusing, soul-shaping number. Maybe it came from a parent who was physically present but emotionally unreachable, there in the room but never truly there. Maybe it came from caregivers who were inconsistent, loving one moment and withdrawing the next, creating a child who never knew which version of love was waiting for them on any given day. Maybe it came from abandonment, real, literal abandonment, or from the kind of emotional neglect that leaves no visible marks but carves the deepest wounds. Maybe it came from being too sensitive in an environment that punished sensitivity, too needy in a household that rewarded independence, too cunning, expressive around people who were emotionally shut down. Whatever the origin, the conclusion was the same. Love is not reliable. Closeness is not safe. The only person you can truly count on is yourself. And so the child adapted, because children are the most extraordinary adapters on the planet. They will reshape their entire emotional landscape to survive the environment they are given. The inner child of the avoidant did not die. It did not disappear. It simply went underground, deep into the interior, wrapped itself in layers of self-sufficiency and emotional independence, and learned to function, even thrive on the surface of life, while remaining fundamentally, achingly untouched in its deepest places. This is the wound that no career success can heal. No amount of achievement, independence, or self-mastery reaches it. No number of friends, experiences, or carefully maintained casual relationships gets close enough to touch it. The inner child sits in its protected silence, waiting for something it simultaneously longs for, and is terrified of the experience of feeling genuinely, unconditionally, reliably safe in the presence of another human being. And then love arrives. The right love, the patient love, the love that does not punish emotional withdrawal with anger or manipulation. The love that does not use vulnerability as ammunition. The love that shows up on Tuesday the same way it shows up on the good days, steady, consistent, present. And something extraordinary begins to happen in the deepest chambers of the avoidance heart. The inner child stirs, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet, tentative, heartbreaking hope of someone who has been in a dark room for a very long time and just noticed for the first time a sliver of light beneath the door. That child, the one who decided love was dangerous, the one who built the whole fortress of avoidance to survive, begins to whisper something it has never permitted itself to whisper be. Running for maybe I don't have to run this time. Those 8 words represent one of the most profound psychological and spiritual breakthroughs a human being can experience, because embedded in that whisper is not just hope, it is healing. It is the beginning of the reparative experience that every avoidance nervous system has been starving for since childhood. When the right person holds space with enough consistency, enough gentleness, enough unconditional presence, they are not just loving the adult standing in front of them. They are reaching all the way back through time and offering safety to the child who never received it. This is why the avoidance transformation in love feels so total, so overwhelming, so disorienting to them. They are not just falling for a person. They are healing a wound that predates every adult relationship they have ever had. They are giving that inner child for the very first time the answer it has always deserved to the question it never stopped running, asking. Yes, you are safe here. You always were. And when that child finally believes it, when that deepest, most protected part of the avoidant finally exhales after years of holding its breath, what gets released into the relationship is not just love. It is a lifetime of love that never had anywhere safe enough to land. There is a particular kind of prison that has no bars, no walls, no guards standing at the entrance with weapons drawn. There is a particular kind of prison that has no bars, no walls, no guards standing at the entrance with weapons drawn. It is the most sophisticated prison ever constructed because the prisoner built it themselves, maintains it themselves, and has convinced themselves so completely that it is actually freedom that they stopped looking for the door a long time ago. This is the prison of emotional invulnerability, and the avoidant has been its most devoted, most disciplined, most accomplished inmate. From the outside, it looks like strength. It looks like independence. It looks like someone who has it together, who doesn't need validation, who moves through the world unbothered by the emotional turbulence that seems to derail everyone else around them. People look at the avoidant and say, I wish I could be that strong. I wish I didn't feel things so deeply. I wish I could just not need people the way they don't need people. And the avoidant hears this, and somewhere beneath the composed exterior, something hollow echoes back because they know the truth that the admiring onlookers cannot see. It is not strength. It is armor. And armor, no matter how beautifully crafted, no matter how effectively it protects, was never designed to be lived in forever. It was designed for the battlefield, not for the dinner table, not for the quiet Sunday morning, not for the moment when someone reaches across the space between two souls and asks, with their eyes, will you let me know you? The avoidant learned early that vulnerability was the enemy. Not in those exact words, perhaps, but in the language of lived experience. In the moments their openness was exploited, their sensitivity was mocked, their emotional needs were dismissed or weaponized by people who should have known better. And so they drew the most logical conclusion available to them at the time. Openness equals exposure. Exposure equals pain. Therefore, the path to survival is to never be fully open, to always maintain enough emotional distance that no one can ever get close enough to truly hurt them. And for years, it works. Perfectly, efficiently, devastatingly well. But love, real love, the transformative kind, does something to this belief system that nothing else in life could accomplish. It does not attack the armor directly. It does not demand vulnerability or issue ultimatums about emotional availability. It simply exists consistently and warmly in such close proximity to the avoidant's carefully guarded interior that something begins to shift at a cellular level. The avoidant starts to notice that being known by this particular person does not feel like exposure. It feels like relief. That speaking their truth to this particular soul does not produce the punishment their nervous system has been bracing for. It produces connection, warmth, a profound and disorienting sense of being received. And in that receiving, the great rewiring begins. Vulnerability stops being the thing they protect against and starts being the thing they reach for. Not recklessly, not overnight, but with the deliberate, almost reverent care of someone discovering for the first time that what they believed was their greatest weakness is actually the source of their most extraordinary power. Because here is the truth that transforms everything: vulnerability is not the absence of strength. Vulnerability is strength that has grown mature enough, secure enough, courageous enough to no longer need to prove itself through walls and distance. Carefully maintained emotional unavailability. When the avoidant finally embraces vulnerability in the context of genuine love, they do not become less, they become more. More present, more alive, more capable of the kind of depth and authenticity in relationship that most people spend their entire lives searching for without finding. The very sensitivity they spent decades suppressing becomes their greatest relational gift. The emotional depth they armored over becomes the well from which they draw the most extraordinary capacity for empathy, understanding, and profound human connection. They discover that being known, truly, completely, imperfectly known, is not the terrifying annihilation they always feared. It is the most exquisite liberation they have ever experienced. The prison they built so carefully, the armor they maintained so faithfully, the distance they protected so vigilantly, none of it was freedom. This is freedom. This breathtaking, trembling, wide-open, chosen, cunning vulnerability. This is where their greatest strength was hiding all along, not behind the wall. Inside the wound, the wall was built to cover. There is a profound and sacred irony at the very heart of the avoidance journey through love. There is a profound and sacred irony at the very heart of the avoidance journey through love. The person they have been avoiding the longest, the person they have been running from with the most determination, the person they have kept at the greatest emotional distance through every carefully constructed defense and every strategic withdrawal, is not an ex-lover, not a parent, not a friend who hurt them. It is themselves. The avoidant, in all their complexity and contradiction, has spent years, sometimes an entire lifetime, in flight from their own interior, from their own needs, from their own longing, from the version of themselves that still believes in connection, still hungers for belonging, still carries somewhere beneath all that armor a cunning, tender and luminous capacity for love that never fully died, no matter how hard life tried to extinguish it. This is the deepest truth about avoidance that most conversations never reach. It is not fundamentally about other people. Other people simply became the trigger, the reminder, the uncomfortable mirror that reflected back the parts of themselves the avoidant was not yet ready to face. Every time they withdrew from intimacy, they were not just retreating from another person. They were retreating from the version of themselves that needed that person. Every time they shut down emotionally, they were not just closing the door on someone else. They were closing the door on their own longing, their own softness, their own beautiful and terrifying humanity. And so they walked through the world as a fraction of themselves, competent, capable, impressive, even, but fundamentally incomplete, like a symphony being played with half the instruments silenced.
The music still sounds like so
Cunning, mething. But anyone who has heard the full orchestra knows that something essential, something irreplaceable is missing. Then love arrives. And not just any love, but the specific, patient, penetrating love that refuses to be satisfied with the fraction. The love that hears the incomplete symphony and says, I know there is more, I will wait for the rest. And in the presence of that love, in the warmth of that extraordinary patience, the avoidant begins the most important journey of their entire life, not toward the other person, but toward themselves. Because the right relationship is always, at its deepest level, a mirror. It reflects back not just who you are in this moment, but who you are capable of becoming. It shows you the places where you have been hiding, the ways you have been shrinking, The parts of yourself you abandoned so long ago, you forgot they ever existed. And for the avoidant, this mirror reveals something that stops them completely in their tracks. It shows the MA person who is worthy of the love being offered, a person who is not too damaged, not too complicated, not too broken to deserve genuine, lasting, unconditional connection. A person who, beneath all the defense mechanisms and the emotional architecture of self-protection, is good. Deeply, fundamentally, beautifully good. This is the revelation that changes everything. This is the moment the avoidant does not just fall in love with another person, they fall in love with themselves. Not in the shallow, self-congratulatory way that word is sometimes used, but in the profound, healing, transformative way that means they finally stop abandoning themselves. They finally stop treating their own needs as inconveniences. They finally stop punishing themselves for having a heart that feels deeply and a soul that longs for connection. They begin to extend to themselves the same patience, the same compassion, the same unconditional regard that their partner has been extending to them.
And when?
And that happens when the avoidant finally meets themselves fully, finally accepts themselves completely, finally stops running from their own interior, and instead turns toward it with curiosity and kindness. The healing that occurs is not just personal, it is generational. It breaks cycles that have been running in their family line for decades. It rewrites patterns that were handed down through generations of emotionally unavailable people loving each other the only way they knew how, which was never quite enough. The avoidant who loves fully does not just transform their own life. They transform every life they touch from that moment forward. Their children will know a different kind of parent. Their partner will know a different kind of love. Their world will know a different kind of person. Not perfect, but present. Not fearless, but faithful. Not without wounds, but no longer defined by them. This is the ultimate destination of the avoidance journey, not just to love another, planning person well, but to finally, tenderly, courageously come home to themselves and discover that they were worth loving all along.